I think it's an experience many of us have had where you're around somebody who seems at first glance to be very interesting and they become your friend maybe. They're very dramatic and they have all these stories to tell. They seem almost slightly larger than life, and you engage with them and then you become friends. Then slowly, 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 it becomes clear that they're a little bit nuts, right? They're always talking about how this person screwed them, how that person screwed them, how this boyfriend or girlfriend was so awful and so nasty. You begin to realize, is this true, or is it maybe that they are the problem? But now they're your friend, and now you're emotionally attached to them, and now they have room to play all these kinds of games on you. All of their drama starts infecting you, and it's like, God damn it, I want to get away from this person, but I can't. They've infected you with their negative energy, and it gets under your skin. So you have to avoid people like that. You have to recognize before you get involved with them that they are a drama queen or a drama king, because there are just as many men out there who have this quality. You have to see that they play the victim of everybody else, but actually they kind of bring it on themselves. Some people are genuinely unfortunate. Bad things have happened to them, and it's not their fault. I'm never saying, and it's a misconception about that chapter, that you should avoid everybody who's unfortunate. There are people, and a lot of people out there, whose circumstances have put them where they are and what's going on. It's not their fault, right? But then there are other people. You have to recognize that the bad things that happen to them are things that they have brought on because they have this infecting power. It comes from deep insecurity. You don't want them in your life. Being around insecure people will make you insecure. Being around confident people who kind of know what they're doing, who've got their act together, who are trying to make things and accomplish things. Because there are so many people out there who talk and talk and talk, but never do anything. Or being around people who do things, who get things done, who've made a business, who've made this, that, or the other, they're gold to be around because they'll infect you with their positive energy. Frenemies. Yeah, do we all have frenemies? And how do we spot frenemies? Well, hopefully, we all don't have them. But in the laws of human nature and in several of my books, I talk about the phenomenon of envy, which is a very, very powerful human trait. It has roots, very ancient roots. We know that in hunter-gatherer societies from thousands of years ago, envy was a real problem. And so they created all kinds of rituals to avoid envy, where the moment somebody in a tribe received a gift, they had to give it to other members so they wouldn't face envy, because facing envy, you could be murdered for it. So you learned all these rituals. And we've noticed that chimpanzees feel envy. You give one of the higher-up chimps, because they're very hierarchical, a grape, and all of a sudden all the other chimps want that grape as well, and they feel envy, etc., etc. So it's an extremely human emotion. The thing that we don't realize, though, is that the people most likely to feel envy, first of all, we all feel envy. We're all comparing ourselves to other people. I feel it all the time. Right now, I envy Brian Holiday because he's, 30 years younger. He's sold so many books. He's got all this great stuff. I know what envy is like. I feel it. We all feel small degrees of envy, but there are people, I call it passive envy. But active envy means people act on it. They do something to hurt you. They sabotage you in some way. Frenemies are the classic scenario. So somebody who feels envious of you ends up befriending you, and consciously, they may not even be aware of that. They think, well, I do want to like them, but unconsciously, they feel envy. They think that you have success that you don't necessarily deserve, that you have what they want, right? They become your friend, and they charm you, etc., etc., and then, lo and behold, you start noticing all kinds of behavior that's very ugly that you weren't expecting because they're your friend. They start saying comments that get under your skin. They make you feel insecure. They take things from you. They act in ways that are hurtful. But because they're your friend, your first instinct is to blame yourself. Well, maybe it's my fault that they've done this. Maybe I'm actually to blame for what they're saying, etc., etc. So I believe behind the phenomenon is this phenomenon of envy, where the person secretly wants what you have and they're becoming your friend so that they can wound you. And what's best to do is to recognize that. One common sign of a frenemy, of somebody who's befriending you out of envy, is they're in a rush to be your friend. Normally, we like to take it a little bit slow. We just don't let anybody into our lives. We like to vet them a little bit beforehand, right? We don't trust everybody. But the person who feels envy is like, I love you. You're fantastic. I want to be your friend. We've got to hang out. Let's go out for dinner the next night. Set. They're in a hurry. That's a sign that something else is going on because that's not natural. What about when friends become frenemies? Because sometimes through the process of us changing, you might inspire that envy. Yes, like your status changes. We've all had to deal with that. I've had to deal with that as well. You have success and you came from a background where you weren't so successful and your friends are still there and they envy you and they're not very nice to you. And you know, it's not a good quality. I've understood the quality. I understand where it comes from and I've written about it in Human Nature where we're all aware of what we call schadenfreude. Schadenfreude means you take pleasure in other people's pain. So you hear a friend didn't get the job that they wanted to get and you go, oh, I'm sorry. But deep down inside, you're kind of happy, you know, and we all go through that, right? The opposite is Mitfreude. It's an expression that Nietzsche coined, which means you feel joy for other people. I like to try and cultivate some of the higher qualities in life. So if something good happens to somebody, my first thing is I might feel a twinge of envy. But then I go, it's great for them. I'm actually very happy. I'm excited. I share their joy in what has happened. But it's not natural. So when somebody that you know and you've known for a long time has success in life, your first thing is to be, they didn't deserve it. They kind of cheated their way to it. Okay, as we talked about in the very beginning, you confront that ugly emotion yourself and you go, that's not who I want to be. And you go, I'm going to make myself feel the opposite. I'm going to make myself feel happy for their success. It's not natural, and most people don't go through that. And I know personally, from people I knew before I had any success in life, they are the ones that give me the fewest amount of compliments for my books. They never read my books in the first place. They're very spare with what they say. They've got a pinched look on their face. Whereas people I've never met before in my life give me all kinds of compliments. Why is that? Because they're envious. They're upset. Are you threatening them because they see themselves like you, because they knew you and where you're from, where they were from? So you're even more threatening. You're holding up a mirror to them in a way that makes them feel even more uncomfortable. Well, they're not going to feel that way. So what people will go through in that sense is, and this is how I think through it, oh, Robert sold himself out. He wrote a book that's evil, that's nasty, that manipulates. I didn't think he was like that. I thought he was this nice person. Oh, I don't like his book. It's ugly. They'll go through that process. They'll stay my friend because we've had years and years together. It's very, very common. At least I know that they do that with my books. Even though my later books aren't like the 48 Laws of Power, they still have it in their brain that this guy who used to be so sweet and nice wrote these nasty, evil, manipulative Machiavellian books. He sold out. What is it at the heart of the 48 Laws of Power that some people are triggered by? What was the single most triggering concept, or the most controversial, or the concept that people just had a surface-level allergic reaction to on sight without even really reading it? They read the back of the book. They read the names of the laws, and they go, oh, I don't know, that's ugly. And a lot of times, they've had to deal with ugly people in their lives. And so that's when I see the authentic disgust reaction. I understand it, that they had to deal with someone who's very manipulative, and they find it disgusting. Of course, when I get to have a rational discussion with them and I calm down their emotional reaction, I say, look, if you had the 48 Laws of Power before this person manipulated you, they would have never been able to manipulate you. That book is the best defense you could ever have in your life. It's like a shield. Once you've read it, you know all the tricks people are playing on you, right? They know they're posing as a friend and acting like a spy, right? They're concealing their intentions, you know, etc., etc., etc. It's showing you all of these tricks. Okay, but that's when they calm down and are able to say that. But the idea that we're not angels, that we don't all have the best intentions in life, that I'm writing a manual, they think, for how to manipulate, how to deceive, how to con people, triggers people very much. A lot of people who've suffered in life, who've had a lot of pain, understand that there's irony in the book. They don't read it the same way. They read it knowing, yeah, I've had this happen. This is what people are like. I'm okay with it. I'm cool with it. And I must say, I don't know if this will come off wrong, but a lot of the readers who responded most positively to the 48 Laws of Power early on were African Americans, people like 50, people in the hip-hop business, etc. They didn't have any illusions about human nature, about how good we are, because they've seen the side all throughout their lives, right? 50 said when he got into the record business, he was shocked at how political people were, how manipulative they were. So they weren't having that same reaction. They weren't having the guilty reaction like, oh, I don't want to read about that. Why do we even have to discuss that? That's not positive. That's not helpful. I think a lot of what triggered people. It's funny because I was speaking to a CIA agent recently, and he said something at the end of our conversation to me. He said, you know, one of the things I've come to learn from being in the CIA is that I no longer believe that equality is possible. And he said, equality. Equality. Yeah, because that's just not the way that the human world works. And we all pretend we want equality. We all pretend we want everyone to be equal. But if you look at every game we play, whether we're politicians or we're business people or whatever, it's all about hierarchies and power and getting ahead. Even the sheer nature of being a politician is campaigning to get into a position of objective power. And I wanted to know what you thought about that. Well, I mean, there's some truth to it in the sense of there's something in our nature that is hierarchical, that has deep roots in us. But I do believe in one form of equality, and that is everybody at their birth has the possibility for following the path that I talk about in Mastery, for being great, for fulfilling their destiny, for being the unique individual that they are at birth. So everybody is born with a DNA that will never be replicated in the past or in the future, right? There is a uniqueness about every person, and there's a uniqueness about your parents, about your background, about your early years, right? And that uniqueness is a seed that if you plant, if you cultivate it, and you use it, and you know your purpose, and you mine it for power and mastery. I interviewed one of the masters I interviewed, and she was a woman named Temple Grandin, who was born with severe autism. At the age of 2, she was about to be committed to a hospital for the rest of her life. She was almost like in a walking coma. So for some reason, they got her a teacher to teach her language, and she started emerging a little bit, and then slowly she blossomed. And she realized, because it was something common to a lot of autistic people, that she had an incredible connection to animals. And a lot of autistic people have that. She couldn't connect to people. They were so tricky and deceptive. She didn't know how to deal with them. But animals gave her a horse, a dog, a cow. She felt like she was one of them. She ended up following that path and becoming a high-level animal behavioral scientist. She was born with autism, about to be committed to a hospital, and yet she achieved incredible success in life as a scientist. I do honestly, and I'm not faking, I do honestly believe that everyone has that potential, but it's not equal in the outcomes. There are a lot of people, the majority of people don't follow that path, but I do believe everybody has that potential. Is that potential like objective greatness, or is it our own subjective greatness? I.e., I can become the greatest version of Stephen. Or do you believe that everyone could become great in the context of the very best in the world, like Steve Jobs? No, they're not. You don't have to be the very best in the world. When Mastery came out, the New York Times wanted to do a story about my house in the home section. Okay, well, why? But all right, I never get any publicity from mainstream media, so okay, fine. So I had to quickly upgrade my house because they were going to come over with photographers, and we got a man over to do the tile work on my patio, which looked like hell. And I told people this guy was a true master. He wasn't making 6 figures. Nobody would ever write an article about him. He will die, and no one will ever know that. But I could see in the quiet quality and how well he understood it, and the care that he took in it, and how much he enjoyed creating a beautiful effect with tile work, that he was a master. It doesn't have to be the best ever. You don't have to be famous and successful. There are grades of this. There are degrees of it. For some people, it's just being a great parent. They are very social. They're very empathetic. And they're not maybe going to become an extremely successful finance person, but they're really good at raising their children, and they put a lot of effort and care into it. That's fantastic. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be Steve Jobs. There are levels of it, right? But the sense of This was what I was meant to accomplish, and I'm following it, and I'm happy with what I do. I feel fulfilled by my work. I can go on doing it. I take it seriously. I care about it. I do believe that anybody can have that level of power in their life. I think I struggle with that, if I'm being honest. Please, on a personal level, I struggle with being enough. And also, I think I've grown up in the generation where there's so much comparison everywhere we look. When we open up our phones and Instagram, you're kind of always led to believe that you're not quite there yet. Now, I've contended with the idea that maybe that's a good thing because it drives you forward. It's that pressure you described. It's what creates that urgency, that desperation. So maybe I should never believe I'm there yet. But then also I wonder, am I going to defer happiness off into the future because I think it's behind some kind of accomplishment or job title or success in my life? And you know, when I hear about that tiler, I go, that person that was tiling your patio, I'm really jealous because they sound content with much less than would make me content. What is the correct answer? Is it to be the happy Tyler who's tiling the patio, or is it to be the impatient Steve Jobs that's striving for the personal computer? Well, it depends on who you are. We're all individuals. We all have our unique energies. It's the fact that you're engaged, you love what you're doing, you're emotionally connected to it, that it gives you a sense of fulfillment, that you're not looking over your shoulder thinking, oh, I could be doing this instead. I'm fine with that. It doesn't have to be the Steve Jobs who's continually dissatisfied, who's always wanting more. I'm not against that either. I don't know why we have to be so judgmental. If people are following the path and they are in love with what they do and they have a genuine connection to it, I'm not going to judge it because they're not famous or because they're not trying to be the greatest, the Michael Jordan of tiling or whatever, etc. I think it's fine. And you're not happy. You want to crush it. You want to have the #1 podcast. That's fine as well. Why can't we have that kind of diversity in our world? The most important thing for both those types of people, the people that have that sort of insatiable sense of ambition, but also the people that are content with whatever they're doing in their lives, from what I heard, they both love what they're doing, and they both have those core components that you described earlier. They both feel the challenge in their work still, and that challenge might be, okay, I'm going to do a bigger patio today. Or it might be, I'm going to launch $1 billion business tomorrow for someone else. And it's really about those core components of challenge, meaning, and purpose. Yeah. Because what you don't want is you don't want to be in your 50s, in your 60s, facing death, because your days are numbered. Who knows how long you're going to live? And you're going to go, damn it, I could have done something with my life. When I was a child, I had these dreams. I thought I was going to be really great at it, and I never realized it. I went off on these other paths. I was lost. I thought I was happy, but I never really fulfilled any of those childhood dreams or those fantasies. It's a terrible, terrible feeling. And I want people to avoid that. As long as it's something that engages you, that's connected to that child that you were, it's something that you love, and that you can create these challenges for you. Is death a motivator for you? Well, it certainly is now, because my days are literally numbered. You reach a certain age, and you can literally count the number of days that might be left to you. And I nearly died several years ago with my stroke. Came this close to dying. I was driving my car, and if my wife hadn't suddenly seen something, I wouldn't be talking to you here right now. Either I would have crashed and died, or I would have had such bad brain damage that I'd be a vegetable. So I know about death. I feel it in my body every day I wake up. I do my morning meditation. I'm aware there's a practice that I have in my meditation where this could be my last thought. I could die 10 seconds from now. What do I want in my head in those last seconds? Do I want to have some petty little thought about somebody who did this or said that? Or do I want to have something else greater in my head? I'm constantly aware of my mortality. And with the book that I'm writing, it's always in my mind because, frankly, I'm aware that I might die before I finish the book. So now I've written 2/3 of it. If I die tomorrow, the book can be published. And that's okay, I can live with that. But, I'm in a hurry to get it done because I know it could happen at any moment, and it almost happened to me. So I'm continually aware of it, but not in a bad sense. In a way, it gives meaning to my life. It makes me aware of how valuable each moment is and how things that I look out my window, I see people doing things that I can't do anymore, and I go, they take it all for granted. They walk around unaware of their mortality, of how their body could break down at any day now. I'm aware of it. So I'm not going to feel envy because my mind is at a different level. I'm aware of the ephemeral nature of life. And it makes everything kind of beautiful to me. It makes me appreciate everything around me. I don't mean to be too saccharine about this because it could come off that way, because there's a dark side to it. And I definitely, in my dreams and in my thoughts, I have a lot of that darkness. But I believe the awareness of death is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It makes everything intense and makes everything aglow. With that awareness, if you were my age, I've just turned 31. Wow, you're a kid. I was 31. I was the biggest loser. That's amazing. If I could transplant that awareness from your head to my head, it's hard, what you've got from the life you've lived, but also from that stroke incident and the perspective of your mortality that it gave you and the ephemerality of life that it showed you. How do you think I would live my life differently? How would you have lived your life differently when you were 31? You know, I make a point of I never go through that exercise because I believe in something called amor fati, which means love of your fate. Everything happened for a purpose. I wouldn't have done anything differently if I had to go back, because it all led to the right things. So if I had been in a hurry when I was 22 to be successful as a writer, I would have never been able to write the books that I wrote. It would have all gone askew. Who knows where I would have ended up? I'm very, very happy with it. I don't regret anything. But if you're young, what often happens is because your life, the pattern of your life, if you think of it as a weaving, is only like, for you, only like a third woven. For me, it's like 2/3 woven. So I can see all of these patterns that you can't see in your life. But at your stage, you tend to think, I've got all of this time ahead of me. I'm so young. I can do this. I can go travel here. I can do this business and that business, etc., etc. You don't feel that sense of urgency. You don't realize that tomorrow you could be hit by a car. Tomorrow you could suddenly be diagnosed with cancer. People are dying now in their 30s and 40s. I read, unfortunately, when you get older, a bad habit is you start reading the obituary pages. I don't know why. And you start reading about people. A lot of people who are in their 40s and 50s are dying left, right, and center today for various reasons. It can happen. And what it does to you is it says, I only have so much time. I wanted to accomplish this one thing that I've been putting off. Okay, you wrote your book. Maybe there's something else that you've always wanted to do, but you've never done, and you're kind of putting it off. A sense of urgency, a sense that your time is relatively short, is a good thing. The other thing is it makes, as I said, it makes everything a little more intense, a little more aglow is the word I like to use. So I used to swim like 3 days a week, and I would swim long distances, and I loved it. It was my greatest therapy. I just loved getting out of my head and just going, being in the water, okay. But I never appreciated it until now when I can't do it. So I want you to appreciate going to the gym, having your health, being able to do these things. Or don't look at it like you take it for granted. And it pisses me off that young people take all this stuff for granted. They think that I'm privileged because I have this success center. No, when you're young, you have all those privileges. You have your health. You have other things that are going to be taken away from you. Don't take for granted these things in your life that you have that are not going to last forever. Think in those terms and think of how much more intense everything around you becomes when you have that mindset. One of the things I think I worry that I take for granted is my romantic relationship with my partner. And, hearing your story of being in that car that day, it's literally evident that your romantic partner can save your life, or she did. And yeah, we've been together for a while. I'm not going to say how many years because she doesn't like hearing that. So, we have a deep, rich past, and it is a wonderful thing. And she saved my life. And saving someone's life, man, it really means a lot. It changes things. And in my book that I'm writing now, I wrote a chapter on love, which is something I've never written about. Obviously, I've written about seduction, etc., but I've never written about love. And I wrote about the sublime quality that you can have when you allow yourself to go deeper and deeper and deeper into that falling process, where you get rid of your ego, you get rid of your defenses, you get rid of all the resistance, and you just let yourself fall, and you connect to someone on that deeper, deeper level. It's, as I say, it's a chapter on the sublime because it is a very sublime experience. And the reason I wrote it is I feel like people are missing that now because they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want any pain. And falling for another person and letting go of your defenses opens you up to pain, right? And we don't want to experience that. We want to be invulnerable. And it's like cutting off all the richest experiences in life. And so I wrote that chapter addressing that and saying, let go of your defenses. Let go of your resistance. Let yourself go into that process of falling. Let yourself feel what it feels like to have your ego dissolved in the presence of another person and care more about them than you care about yourself. You mentioned a second ago dark thoughts and dark dreams. We all have dark thoughts. Our dark thoughts are our own. How do you go about dealing with dark thoughts, and what are those dark thoughts that you're able to share? Well, in my dreams, I'll be doing all kinds of weird things. A lot of times there'll be guilt, like, did I actually murder that person? Are the police actually after me? Damn it, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to my reputation? Then I wake up, So all that kind of stuff happens, but also doubts about myself and depression and I've dealt my whole life with feelings of not being very worthy. Like even doubting my success, doubting that my work is any good, doubting that I deserve it. I had a lot of periods in my life where I wasn't successful. And I kind of had it ingrained in me that I could do better, I could do better, I could do better. I wasn't a good parent to myself. I was very tough on myself. And a lot of my dark thoughts are, I'm still very tough on myself. And it's like, the other dark thoughts that I have is I can't do the things that I used to be able to do. Is life even worth living when you can't hike, when you can't swim, when you can't go out on your bicycle, when you can't travel normally? Is it really worth it? Maybe death wouldn't be so bad compared to that. I go through that, and then I talk myself out of it again and again and again. But my dark thoughts are about myself and my doubts and about the state of my body as it is right now, kind of thing. If I said to you that I had those same doubts about, if we were identical in every way, and I said, Robert, I'm having a lot of doubts. I can't go out on my bicycle. I can't do the things I used to do. I'm wondering if life is worth living. And I asked you for advice. I said, I don't know what to do about all this self-doubt I have about these books that I've written. What would you say to me? Well, I would say there's a lot of people who talk a lot in life, who say they've accomplished this, that, and the other, and they've never done anything. You have a book out there that you can be very proud of, that you can die tomorrow, and it's like a memento that will live on forever, and you've accomplished it. You've accomplished this stuff with your podcast. You've actually made things. So focus on that. Focus on the fact that so many people never get out of bed and amount to anything. So you've built things. You've accomplished things. Or focus on that. And then about your body, well, when you're dead, it's all gone. Who knows what there is on the other side? But just think of the insanity of what it means to be alive. And that's another chapter in my new book. The odds against you, Stephen, of ever being born are absolutely insane. And I describe those odds in the book. And I go through from the very first cells that ever formed, from life forming on planet Earth, to the evolution leading to us sitting here. It's unbelievable. So that you are alive is an incredible, astounding thing. And you have to think about that. And you have to think about just seeing the sky, just being aware is an amazing thing. So I often think about people who are suicidal. There are a lot of people like that in life, particularly nowadays. And I know because I went through that period most strongly in my early to mid 30s as I was contemplating the lack of success in my life. And what kept me going was I still believed that I could accomplish something. So even in my darkest moments, I managed to pull myself out. But then I think of people who maybe don't have that energy, who are kind of going down that hole. And I know from my own experience that hearing somebody tell them that life is incredibly amazing won't have any effect on them, right? Because it doesn't connect to them emotionally. And I often think, how could I connect to them emotionally? Or how could I make it clear to them that there's something there that's worth preserving? I don't have the answer here today, but I think about that all the time. Like, how would I deal with somebody who is suicidal? And I get people writing me like that. And I've had relatives in those situations before. So that's something I think a lot about. It's a difficult question to answer. What you have to say to that person in that situation to get them to believe in the sublime, to get them to believe that this life is worth living. I ponder whether what maybe you need to do is to get them to take the first step to create evidence for themselves somehow. Whatever that small first step is, I think that's great. I think that's spot on. That's exactly what you have to do. They have to come to the realization themselves, and through some action that you get them to do, which gives them a little bit of an ounce of belief in themselves, then the spiral can turn around. So I think you're right. It has to come from them, and it has to come from something that they actually do. All the talk in the world won't really help them. What that is something that I would like to think about. And it depends on the individual, but that, I think, is the way to do it. You're writing this book at the moment called The Sublime, right? Are you writing that book because of the situation you found yourself in after having the stroke and going through that journey of saying, why is life worth living? And going in search of the sublime that we all have inherently? Well, to be honest with you, about 20 years ago, I had the idea for the book. I read a book on the subject and I got excited about it because they were explaining it as a kind of experience that's very hard to verbalize. It goes outside of what we normally experience. And I got very excited by the idea, and I planned to write that book. And then after a while, that was going to be my fourth book. And my agent was getting all prepared to sell it. And then I got hooked on 50 Cent and I did that book instead, and I put it on the back burner. And then Mastery came up and I got hooked on that, and suddenly it kind of got pushed aside. And then in Human Nature, first of all, the last chapter in the 50 Cent book is on the sublime. It's about death and 50 and facing it. Then the last chapter in Human Nature is about the sublime, is about death and mortality. And the irony is that 2.5 months after finishing that chapter in the book, I nearly died. But what I had planned originally was I was going to go to the Gobi Desert and walk across the Gobi Desert. I was going to swim with whales, literally whales, in New Zealand. I was going to go to Tierra del Fuego. I was going to have all of these sublime experiences and write about them. And now I can't do any of that, right? All I can do is sit in my little room in my house at my desk and write the book. It's all in my head. The book is so much better because of that. So it's changed. I can't go to the Gobi Desert. I can't swim with whales or I drown. I can't go to Tierra del Fuego. I can only sit in my office, look at the birds, go through the books that I'm reading, and write the book, keeping in mind other people and what's going on in the world and their life and my limitations. So ironically, the book has become better because I had to go through this experience, but nearly dying was little bells were going off in my head. All right, it's time to write that book. You're not putting it off any longer. And has it forced you to find the sublime in everyday life? Well, obviously, I'm writing right now a chapter on what I call the demon, which is an ancient Greek concept that all of us are born with, like a guardian spirit, right? I know it sounds very mystical, but a lot of psychologists, contemporary psychologists, have written about the daemon phenomenon. The idea that you have a second self, a kind of higher self that in some way is guiding you. And it has a lot to do with some of the things we've talked about, purpose, etc. And I have to think about it in terms of my own life. I have to think about, is there something else inside of me that's communicating to me? What does that mean? How does that connect with other ideas about the universe? I get to read books about it. It's a very, very exciting process. It's keeping me alive right now. And then, I write a chapter about animals and what's sublime about interspecies communication. And now I get to look at my cat. I don't look at my cat or I don't look at the birds the same way as I did before I wrote that chapter. So it's changing me. And it's lifting me out of the kind of depression that people who have strokes, we all have to go through terrible diseases, all of us unfortunately, unless we die by an accident, cancer, etc., strokes. The number one thing that happens is terrible depression, or to suddenly lose your body and what you could do. And so this has kept me out of that depression, I have to say. You said that all of your books have been kind of focused on different subjects, and that's very much the case. There are sometimes threads between the different books, but they're all very much focused on a variety of different subjects. If there was a message that kind of brings all of your work together, if this was your last day on Earth, what would the message that you would want to leave the world with be? Wow, that's a really good question. A lot of my books have to do with the reality of our life. Not what we want to believe, not our fake ideas about it, not our illusions, etc., but what life is really, really like. This is the human animal. This is how they behave. This is what will seduce them. This is what will turn them off. This is how strategies will get us what we want in life. This is how you can master your subject. Not the thing that people tell you about mastery, where you can take a drug, where you can hack your way to mastery. This is the truth. This is the reality. So all of my books, the through line is, this is what the world is really like. It's not ugly. It's not beautiful. It just is. And it's great to just relate to the world as it is, to see things as they are. It kind of is liberating. And in a way, it is kind of beautiful to just connect to the reality and not be inside of your wishes about, why can't people be more like this? Why can't somebody tell me this? Why can't they give me this? Why can't I be successful? Blah, 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 blah. Getting rid of your illusions and just looking at the way life is sort of, I guess, would be the through line of all of my books. Do you see life as a bit of a game? And is that a healthier way to view life? A game where we need to learn the rules and then play the game versus fight against the injustice of the rules of the game. Yeah, it's all a game, definitely. There was a great man on the left named Saul Alinsky who wrote a book called Rules for Radicals. He was a strategist for union organizing, and he would hate the world. Today, with people with all of their virtue signaling and everything. He said, if you want to change life, if you believe that there's injustice, you have to be a strategist. It's warfare. You have to organize. You have to understand the rules that will lead to actual change in this world. And whenever you enter the realm of rules and strategy, it is like a game, you know? And so, yeah, I believe that. And I believe people with all their moralistic ideas who think just because they believe something is right, that it will get what they want, they're just living in it. They're fools. You have to strategize. If you don't, you're just bullshitting. You're just pretending. You're just virtue signaling. You want people to see you as a saint. If you're not willing to get your hands dirty and to organize and to say, I've got to take this A, B, C, D, I have to figure out the process of getting there, then all you're doing is just playing a game of appearances, as opposed to the real game of getting things done in life. What is the opposite of that strategy you're talking about? So I'm trying to figure out the average person that is currently not strategizing in their life. What are they doing? Well, everybody. I guess you could say everybody has a strategy, but their strategies are extremely ineffective. Their strategies are full of illusions. So human beings have to strategize, because to wake up in the morning and to go, I've got to make breakfast, you have to strategize how you're going to cook and what you're going to make and what you're going to do during the day and what you're going to wear. You know, it's human nature. It's just people do it very, very badly. And they do it badly because they're so emotional. Now, I'm not against emotions, and emotions play a huge role, and I'm writing a lot about it in my new book. But the ability to get things done, you have to be in control of your emotions. You have to take a step back and you have to go, I'm not going to react. This person is pressuring me. They're saying these things. My natural tendency is to react, get my back up and bite back. No, I'm going to step back. What's going to make them shut up? What's going to make them get out of my life? What's going to get rid of them? What's going to defeat them if they're an adversary? All right, I made that decision not to react, to get emotional. All right, now I have to think, if I do this, they're going to react this way. But if I surprise them with this angle, they won't know what to do, and then they'll react in a different way, and I'll be in control of the situation. I strategize. I go through a process of gaming out the possibilities here, and that's to be a strategist. The opposite is a book that I meant to write after Seduction, which is a book about human stupidity. To not be strategic is to be stupid, and people create more damage in this life than anybody else with their bad strategies, their bad wars, the bad things they lead people into, their bad politics, etc. So that's the opposite of strategy, stupidity. I also heard within there that sort of emotion, being emotionally driven, very much doesn't allow you to have effective strategies, because you'll get caught up in personal things. Yeah. You'll get personal things and things that probably don't matter. That ability to rise above, though, I think we all want to master that. I would love to master the ability to rise above in all situations at all times. Well, you can. When you're younger, it's harder because you've got your hormones, you've got all that energy, you've got all that adrenaline. It's harder. As you get older, it gets a little bit easier. Do you have a system that you use just to detach yourself from the emotion sometimes? Well, I'm not always good at it. So I've learned to not react emotionally when people say something that I think is going to be triggering. I just don't do anything. I go into my Zen mode. Oh, it's just life, it's just words, it's just verbiage, doesn't matter, doesn't mean anything to me. I'm neutral, I'm unaffected, I'm in my citadel. Goodbye, fine, it's okay. If I get angry and I write that email, which I still do, I don't send it. I put it in my draft box. I look at it a week later. What the heck was I thinking about? I'm glad you didn't send that. You delay your reactions. But mostly I've trained myself, and I must say my meditation practices help me to not react when people say things that are so annoying that they get under my skin. I just go, that's them. It's not me. They're another human being. They have a bad idea. I don't care. It's not my bad idea. It's their life. So let's talk about politics. It's a really interesting time in politics at the moment. I'm really obsessed with US politics in particular because it's more like a reality show over here than in the UK. It's quite boring. It is very boring over there, I must admit. This year, Trump is running for re-election against Biden. The country seems to be very divided for a number of different reasons. It feels, I don't know, I just feel like it's more divided than ever. I do feel like the left has moved further left than ever before, to the point that I struggle to resonate with that side, and I still don't resonate with the right, so I kind of feel a bit trapped. What do you think of everything that's going on, and how does your kind of work inform what's happening and everything in between? Well, we all have biases. I've come from more of the liberal side, the left side. I was actually rather extreme when I was younger, so I have that bias. So I'm not really going to be objective. Let's get that out of the way, right? I have my emotional reactions, my triggering by what I see, but I'm very concerned about the overall spirit, the overall zeitgeist. So I know this will sound like I'm going in on a tangent, but bear with me. I was on the board of directors of a publicly traded company, American Apparel, and I was brought on there because I was friends with the CEO, but he thought of me as a strategist because he loved the 48 laws of power, and I started seeing that things were kind of going downhill. And I sort of had my finger on what the problem was. The problem was our demographic was mostly young women at the ages 18 to 24. It's a very difficult demographic to deal with because their tastes change very quickly. They're very viral, etc., etc. And so what worked early on with American Apparel, it was suddenly slowly becoming a cliche, right? And it wasn't going to translate well to a new generation coming up, which ended up being General Z. And so I had the idea that we need to have these retreats, these yearly things where we step back from the day-to-day business and we think about the brand, where we're going, how we're going to adapt. We're not going to change it, but we're going to adapt, etc., etc. I presented it to the CEO. Oh no, we don't need that. What I came away with was that the reason businesses are so awful, large businesses, why they suck, why they're never successful, why they're so damn annoying, is because they're always dealing with the quarterly report. At least for publicly traded businesses, right? They can't have a long-term vision because they can't afford it. They have to deal with what Wall Street will say to that quarterly report and what the investors are, how they're going to react. To sit there and step back and think about where you're going to be in a year or two, we might not even exist in a year or two, so forget it. Well, politics is the same thing. You've got to win elections. You're facing every couple of years, every 4 years. You don't have the luxury of thinking of the larger picture, and that's what we're suffering from right now. Because if you look at the political situation in America, nobody has any loyalty to anything. So in my age, when I grew up, you were a Democrat, you were a Republican, and you had kind of roots, and you believed in that because, well, the Democratic Party was for the working class. We were for the unions. We were for the common guy, the little guy, the FDR mentality. Even to some extent, Kennedy and Johnson. The Republicans were for big business, for lower taxes, blah, 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 blah. You had a sense of connection to it. Now people have no connection at all to any particular party, which is fine. I don't. But what that means is it's so volatile. So somebody will vote for Obama, then they'll vote for Trump, then they'll vote for Biden, and then they'll vote for Trump again. And there are plenty of people in that situation. They have no roots. They're not connected to anything. And it's not people's fault. It's our politics' fault. They're not creating a sense of what it means to be an American. What is it? Can you give us a story, a myth about what it means to be an American in 2024 that will connect us, that will kind of give us a sense of what is beautiful about our country? Because there are beautiful things about it, or it's possible. It's very possible to create that kind of a vision if you can step back and you can think in the longer term. All right, maybe it's hard to do that for America, but what is it for the goddamn Democratic Party? What does it mean to be a Democrat? What does it mean now to be a Republican? It just means to be a lapdog for Donald Trump, to believe everything he does. But the Democrats have their own problems, their own issues. You can't have a party that's just against everything. What are you for? I often tell people I'm sick of hearing what you hate. I'm sick of hearing what you're against. I'm sick of hearing what you're complaining about. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you're for. Tell me your vision of what a great country would be like. But you can't. They can't do that because they're only in this bubble of what I hate, what I'm against, what I'm trying to protect, etc., etc. So there's got to be a politician that rises up at some point that has a vision that's not just a demagogue, that's not just a charismatic person that's looking out for themselves, that can connect the dots, that can say, this is what it means to be in this party. This is our vision. This is what connects. This is the glue. Yeah, they're going to be little separate parts of it. Okay, but we're the party of the working class, right? We're the party that's going to protect people, make life easier for them. Or we're the party of business, etc., etc. I don't care what it is, but create a vision, a sense of who you are, of what it connects to. Hit people in their heart. You see, Trump succeeds because he has an emotional, visceral effect on people, and he's very good at it. The Democrats can't learn that. It's always about a laundry list of, we're going to do A, B, C, D, and E. We're going to hit the numbers. We're going to reduce inflation. We're going to create this amount of jobs, etc. It's all in the head. It's not in here. You've got to create. You've got to connect to people viscerally, emotionally. You have to create a myth that will connect people even within their disparate little niches. And it's possible. Because to believe it's impossible goes against the grain of history. Somebody will emerge. I might be dead when it happens. Who will go through that same process? Because otherwise everything will fall apart. Robert, we have a closing tradition on this podcast where the last guest leaves a question for the next guest. Oh, I remember. I didn't prepare. It's okay. I'm sure you can come up with one about the sublime. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. The question for you is, okay, and you're not allowed.